Hello, Guru Nation and Clinical Research Circle. Welcome to another episode. We've got Greg Johnson. Greg Johnson is the epitome of what we preach on this channel all the time, especially on the Clinical Trials Guru channel, as far as being a generalist and getting in as a specialist, but then expanding your skill set over the years to become a generalist and to become involved at a high level with biotechs, early stage, sometimes mid stage biotechs. Greg, I mean, we can't wait to hear from him. And then he's currently has a pretty big role with Kintara Therapeutics, symbol KTRA. What's your official title with Kintara, Greg?
Technically, I'm a consultant supporting them, but I've been working with Kintara for about 3.5 years now, and I function as the acting head of operations.
Okay, perfect. So acting head of operations. And we're going to talk about that as well, because for those that may or may not know, I mean, for you clinical research nerds out there, there's this very important trial that Greg's involved with. He was a big champion for it, called the Agile trial, for the glioblastoma study that Kintara is doing and that we've covered before. I think it's kind of a paradigm shift and maybe a sneak peek into the future of our industry, how that study, and then I want to get Greg's input on that as well. But Greg, thank you so much for coming. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, my pleasure.
So let's start with your career. How did you ever discover clinical research? Like, was it something that you proactively tried to pursue or something you just fell into?
I know I kind of fell into it, which I have to say, when I started out, which was about 28 years ago, was a fairly typical experience. There was limited possibility of really, going to university and getting a degree in clinical research and going into that field. So a lot of the people I worked with at that time had also kind of fallen into it, either from working at an investigator site or having a background as a statistician. A lot of different backgrounds, but kind of most people, I think, didn't know that the clinical research field existed until they joined it at that time. And I was no different. I was recruited by someone I'd worked with before to a completely different business for an opportunity to go to Germany, to go to a city called Mannheim, Germany, where the company that I was hired at that time for, which was PRA International, which was a top 5 CRO. They later became PRA Health Sciences, and actually they were recently acquired by Icon. At that time, they were a much smaller organization. I spent about 15 years there, and they grew from about 150 people to 3,000 people during the time frame where I was there. And I was recruited because they were opening up a European headquarters, and they had about a dozen people. It was a group of 12 of us that started that out, and they literally wanted one person who was connected to the home office in Charlottesville, Virginia at that time, an American to go into the European operation, sort of perform certain functions, but also be a liaison back to the headquarters.
So data management is kind of how you got started, how you got your foot in the door.
Yeah, it was actually IT and then IT broadening into data management were the original
Okay.
role.
And see, guys, you can't get any more specialist than that, but that doesn't mean that's where you stay. Over the decades, your career expands to a much more broader, more versatile role. You then became director of project management or product management with PRA, and then vice president of operations, and then vice president global data management. So you really had a lot of roles at PRA, and you were there, it says, from 92 to 2007. So you were really there like when they were a small company and then almost publicly traded, if not publicly traded at that time, right?
They had gone public. I think in about 2006 they went public, and that growth is part of where the opportunity to build the generalist background came from, because you definitely create new opportunities if you're growing and opening offices and acquiring companies. It creates more chances, really. And a big factor was just being mobile. I mean, I moved. There was a 15-year period where we relocated from one country to another 6 times. So we moved around a little bit to take advantage of those opportunities, but we were keen to do that, to have the opportunity to live in different countries. And because of that, I think it also contributed to sort of building that background.
Do you think you could have had those same opportunities if you were not able to move?
Yeah, there's other ways to do it, but for us, it definitely contributed. We were lucky to be in that position, and it was also of interest to us. And I think it also helped me with sort of creating the mind frame that helped become a generalist. Because if you want to be a generalist, one thing you end up doing is you switch from one role to another. And there's some challenges associated with that. It's uncomfortable. You spend 4 or 5 years doing something, you build up a certain level of expertise at it. You gain experience, obviously. And if you move into another role, you've already been exposed to it probably, but just by context and by what you're doing. So you're not starting from square one, but you're definitely taking a step back in your relative expertise compared to the people you're working with. And I think that's uncomfortable for most people. It was uncomfortable for me a few times. But the experience of having moved from the US to Germany at a point where I hadn't really traveled that much and didn't speak any German initially, sort of helped create a level of comfort with going into an unknown situation and just realizing that if you were patient and calm, you would eventually adjust and cope with the new situation, which is not different from going from one role to a completely different role. You have to accept that you're going to have some unease at first and have to learn some things.
Mm-hmm. Let's get into, so after PRA, you went to MedGenesis Therapeutics. So sounds like it's a biotech, right?
Yeah. MedGenesis is a biotech company based in Victoria, BC. One of the last roles I had at PRA was we acquired another CRO, about a 400-person company called Cromedica, which was a smaller company than PRA, but they had a larger international footprint. They had nice offices in Brazil and South Africa that were fully fleshed out, for example. And PRA had a great background in oncology, and Cromedica had real strength in CNS. So it was a really nice merger. But they were headquartered in Victoria, and I offered to come up here as the person to integrate the new company into the old company. So that was a very interesting experience. The CEO for Cromedica stayed on at PRA for a number of years as the chief scientific officer, and in fact had his office down the hall from where I was. So that was always an interesting situation. That was sort of the captain of a ship where the admiral is aboard. So you're trying to integrate a group of people into a new company, but their old boss is still senior to you in the organization and sitting down the hall. So it was important to develop a really good working relationship with him. Well, he turned out to be the person who later founded MedGenesis Therapeutics as the principal shareholder and the chairman and CEO of that company. And that created the opportunity for me to move from PRA to a biotech company because of that.
I gotcha. Okay, so basically because you were able to, I guess, assist with the transition, and because in doing so, you developed a close relationship to this person. What was his name again?
This is Dr. Eric Moore.
Okay.
He was chief scientific officer at PRA and then the founder of MedGenesis.
Okay, so see, that's how opportunities find you guys. And then you quickly started. So you, like, with a biotech, and I feel like we're again entering the era of biotechs. I mean, in the late 90s, it was like, really hot. And then after the Great Recession kind of calmed down a little. We're in the middle of another biotech renaissance. And so I'm giving the same advice to people now, like, hey, there's a lot of opportunities at these small biotechs. You went to be senior vice president of operations, chief operating officer, president, and CFO. I mean, even with your skill set, it could have taken a lifetime just to reach any one of those 3 functions with PRA, or like with a bigger company.
Yeah, and biotech is a great place if you want to get a broad-based experience, because if you're working with a smaller company, you simply have the opportunity to wear multiple hats. You'll often have a small group of people, maybe even 4 or 5 people who have their own areas of expertise, but then there'll be a dozen other functions that the company needs to handle that maybe is no one's direct area of expertise. And if you have the willingness to sort of raise your hand and try to take on something new, you get a little more opportunity that way. If you're a big pharma, can be an excellent place to work and build a great career. But if you're working for a Pfizer or a Genentech, they have whole departments with expertise in areas that biotechs don't have a single person on staff to deal with.
Right. What is it about your personality or your DNA that makes you enjoy the chaos of biotech? Because a lot of people wouldn't enjoy that.
Well, I like learning new things, and I'm comfortable with change. I think those are probably the two really key pieces.
And
I
then,
think also, sorry, I think also the fact that you are such a generalist, it just puts you in a really, I mean, it's like you're in a fish in a small tank, but like you're enjoying the whole process because you know basically everything. I mean, you've been exposed to many positions in the past, and not just that, but also different cultures, and that I assume that shapes your career the way it is right now.
Yeah, people I have mentored, I've always encouraged, and not everyone has the opportunity, of course, but if you have the opportunity to spend a period of time working in a different country, I find that really rounds out your approach probably better than any functional role can. I mean, it's a different kind of learning experience, but it's really important, I think.
so let's get into really quick Cagely Johnson Consulting Inc. That's you're the principal consultant there.
Yeah, it's Cagley Johnson.
Oh, Cagley Johnson. Sorry,
Okay.
Cagley Johnson Consulting Inc. You're the principal consultant. Can you tell me how that started? What problems you're trying to solve? And this is the entity that you are currently providing support to Kintara, as well as a few other biotechs. So can you kind of talk to us about that?
Yeah, when MedGenesis finished our phase 2 program and we're at a point where things were going to change there, I left the organization and started a consulting company with my spouse, whose last name is Cagley, and she is an IT specialist and webmaster who has about 20 years of supporting biotech companies too. So she's kind of worked in the same space most of her career. And our purpose was to really be able to be in a position to support small biotechs who needed someone with the generalist skill set, something like a chief operating officer, but we're maybe in a position where hiring a full-time person didn't make sense for their situation. And that's a challenge a lot of biotech companies have. They need a certain level of expertise in different functional areas, but it doesn't make sense for them to build out an internal staff of 15, 20, 25 people, because things happen with early biotech companies. You have delays with manufacturing, or you can end up with a clinical hold of your one primary study. And if you're carrying a burn rate of several $1 million a month and you get put on clinical hold for 3 or 4 months, it fundamentally changes the company. So a lot of biotech companies strive to have a low overhead cost, a low burn rate, and still have the ability to address the skill sets that they need to move their programs forward. So I felt like there was an opportunity for someone with a generalist background to maybe support more than one company and kind of, divide themselves into a fractional head of operations, so to speak.
See, Monica, it's so great to see someone who is living embodiment of what we tell our students every single day. It's CRC Academy. Monica and Chris, you guys have any questions for Greg? Because I want to spend the rest of the interview on Kintara, specifically the Agile study, but any other questions, just career generalist questions, biotech, early stage biotech type of questions?
Oh, I don't really have a question, just a statement, something you had said initially about falling into this accidentally. I think that's still the case for most people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
the research industry.
I think that's true. There are programs that exist now that I don't think existed 28 years ago, where you can actually go and get like a Master of Science in Clinical Research, and some of those are very good. Although in my experience, most of the people I know who have done those programs, I did an MSc in Clinical Research at Liverpool John Moores University, were like me. There were people who had actually been in the industry for 5 or 6 or 7 years at that time, realized they wanted to be doing this, and went back and got a qualification in the area, as opposed to setting out as an undergraduate to go into clinical research.
Yeah, that's right.
Hey.
Just out of curiosity, how many countries in Europe?
How many what?
How many countries were you working in Europe?
Yeah, we lived and worked in Germany for about 4 years, and then from there we went to Swansea in South Wales, where I set up a data management center for PRA. So I spent a little over 5 years in Europe, in Germany and the UK, and then of course I've been in Canada and the US in addition to that. So even with the ability to move around and travel, those are those are still like culturally similar Anglo-Saxon countries. So there's a lot of opportunity to broaden your horizons if you're able to travel. I mean, there are bigger opportunities than even what I've been able to take advantage of in this field, because most companies do work internationally. Even small biotech companies have international footprints sometimes.
You know what? I got to ask, because I get so many people and I never have an answer for data management. How does one get into data management? And then how does one transition from data management to, let's say, being a CRA? If you have like a quick answer to these two, I don't know if there is a quick answer.
People get into data management a couple different ways. Some people, of course, when I was in data management, everything was paper-based initially. So there were a lot of people who came in through real entry-level positions doing data entry, people who just had a medical terminology background or had gone to a class to get good medical terminology and kind of came in as data entry. And that gave them a foundation to grow from. And most people who did that for a few years went on to broader roles. Clinical data coordinators tend to be people who maybe have a life science undergraduate degree, or maybe even somebody who worked at an investigator site and just wants to do something different. Database programmers typically came from a programming background. So people who were comfortable with computers and medical terminology were kind of the key things for getting into that field. And data management's not a bad grounding to build from, just because you enter thousands and thousands of case report forms. You're exposed to a lot of what's going on in clinical research, maybe from initially a smaller perspective, but just seeing the data that's being collected and what's being done with it brings you close to what the end point of all of this is. So it's nice from that perspective.
So I guess the audience wants hope, because we have a lot of data management people watching, but they want to be CRAs. And I mean, yeah, we could spend another hour just on this topic. I guess they feel CRA is safer than data management because of AI and the emergence of technology. I don't know if you want to shed some light on that, but is it possible to go from data management to CRA, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I would be happy to take someone from a data management group and make them a CRA. For one thing, a major function of the CRA is monitoring the data at the site and actually knowing what happens with data entry and data cleaning, as an internal function is a useful thing. If you've been the person generating queries from the data management side, you not only know how to resolve the queries from the site side, but you also know how to prevent things from becoming items that need clarification in the first place. So I think a data manager is a great person for a CRA role. And then a CRA role is a great opportunity to broaden your horizons, and also includes the travel component. I mean, that you get a little exposure from traveling from that too. So
That's a great point.
Just a little.
It may not necessarily be international, but you'll definitely get a broader view of what's going on in the industry by going to multiple sites. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 80% traveling.
That's sometimes being very optimistic about the travel time for CRAs. It's usually 120% of the time traveling.
Yeah, there's a road warrior element to it. There's no doubt about that.
So I guess, Greg, these last 10 minutes, I want to focus on the Agile study with Kintara. Because so like we said earlier, and this part's maybe just going to be the short clip for the Clinical Research Circle, but as we said earlier, you're currently providing consulting support to Kintara Therapeutics. You were the champion, the leading champion for the Agile study. Can you talk to us about, number one, how you discovered this as a potential strategy? If you discovered it, I'm not sure. And number two, how difficult was it to get in? Because it's not like they accept anybody. You had to be invited to this program. So can you talk about those two things, and then we'll talk about the that brings?
Sure. So the company Kintara has two lead molecules, Val-83 and REM-001. Val-83 is a drug that we're developing in glioblastoma, so GBM. And the registrational study for that is being conducted through the GCAR-GBM Agile Study. And we think this is the preeminent path forward for developing this drug. But we also think it's actually just a foundational study. It's a really great study that has the ability to, I think, change the industry a little bit. It's really an example of how clinical research can be done. And we were fortunate to be invited into this. our CEO, Saeed Zarabian, had put together a scientific advisory board, or had revamped the scientific advisory board at Kantara when he came aboard. And a couple of the people he brought into that, which included John DeGroot, he's at MD Anderson Cancer Center, and he was the interim head of oncology at that time, and Tim Clohessy. Both of these scientific advisors to Kantara are actually involved in the GCAR GBM Agile study. Tim Clohessy is the principal investigator for the overall study, and John DeGroot's now the principal investigator for our treatment arm in the study. So we were able to hear about it and get connected to the right people through our scientific advisory board. And then we had a number of conversations with them, both in terms of, was Val-83 a good fit for their study, and did it make sense for Kantara to move forward with a platform study like this where someone else is functioning as a study sponsor. So there's things to consider with that dynamic, of course. But the more we looked at it, the more sold we became on this approach. Just the elegance of the study design, the opportunity for a small biotech company to kind of play on a level playing field with people like Bayer, who were one of the other treatment arms in the study. It just seemed like a really good fit for our situation. So we're thrilled to have the opportunity to be a part of that study.
Yeah, I mean, the more you think about this is kind of sort of like a paradigm shift. We didn't see this 10 years ago, right? Or even 5 years ago. I mean, I'm sure it was done before, but it seems to be more of a common theme now where there's these consortiums that are kind of managing studies. Do you feel like this is actually potentially the future?
Yeah, I think it has that potential, because I think it's a really good way to do this for a number of reasons. It's patient centric. I mean, it's really focused on the patients and trying to bring a new treatment to the patients in the fastest, most elegant way possible. GCAR, who function as the sponsor for GBM Agile, are a nonprofit. They frankly they don't care which treatment arm wins or which treatment arms make it to registration, as long as the best treatment gets to the patients as fast as possible, which is the right way to do clinical research. And because of the way the study is designed, I think it's really beneficial for patients. Patients enroll in a clinical trial in a indication such as GBM with hope that they're going to get access to an experimental therapy. They are typically dissatisfied with what standard of care has to offer, and they're hoping to have an opportunity to try something different, as well as to contribute to moving science forward for future patients. I think there's a philanthropic aspect to a lot of people participating in clinical studies. But because of the way the GCAR study is designed with 3 treatment arms and a common control group, one of the things that falls out of that platform study design is that for the patient subtypes that are in multiple treatment arms, a patient is randomized with an 80% probability of getting one of the experimental treatments and a 20% probability of going to the control group. In a typical clinical trial, you may have a 50-50 chance of going to standard of care, or maybe a 2-to-1 chance, depending on how the study is designed. Here, you've got a much greater chance for the patients to actually receive an experimental therapy, which I think is an important aspect of the study. It's good for us too, because I think it encourages recruitment and allows the study to progress more rapidly. It's good for the science because it's moving forward with 3 different treatment arms at once. And it's good for the patients because they have greater opportunity of kind of getting what they wanted out of the study.
And it's good on the wallet too for a small cap biotech, right?
Oh yeah, there's a number of aspects. I mean, right off the bat, the shared control group is a really nice setup. Any company participating really is only footing the bill for their share of the control group while having access to all of the patients in the control group. And it's actually even cooler than that in the design, because we joined this study after it had been running for a significant period of time, but we're able to take advantage of patients in the control group who enrolled from the beginning of the study on. So we're not even limited to just concurrently enrolled patients in the control group. And having a larger control group, besides cost savings, also helps with the statistical power. I mean, we benefit from that. There'll be less variability in those elements of the analysis, and that increases the likelihood of success if your treatment is actually effective.
Yeah, I did want to highlight that, because I think that, as social investors myself, Monica, Chris, it's kind of our job this is not financial advice, by the way, for anyone watching. It's our job to show you guys the biotech's cool things that we think are happening, such as the Agile study. I mean, it's kind of a paradigm shift, but I think the average investor in this sector does not realize all the moving parts that go into a clinical trial. And if you're sponsoring it on your own, things can get really expensive, and then you can't afford any misses on data, enrollment, any milestone, any type of milestone is going to potentially kill the company. So in the case of a Kintara, you guys have set it up to where there's way less pressure on you guys for short-term results, and you could take a longer-term approach. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that being in a platform study like this really de-risks things for Kintara in a number of ways. We have access to, because this is really a prestige trial and it has the 3 treatment arms, and GCAR is backed by really all of the experts in the space. We have best of breed vendors. For example, the CRO running the study on behalf of GCAR is IQVIA. Covance is the central lab. Metadata is the data management provider. Don Berry and Associates are the statistical support. Like, these are all experts in their field.
Yeah.
And small companies can have access to those folks, but it's challenging if you're the world's, one of the world's largest CROs and you're dealing with a 5-person biotech company. They'll certainly say they're going to pay you the same attention that they are a big pharma company, but there are economic realities to how they run their business. On the other hand, when you're part of a platform trial that has 3 different sponsors involved, backing from experts in the field all the way through to the FDA, I feel like we get probably excellent attention from all the folks who are working on this study. And that de-risks it for us too. So I think there's a lot of ways in which this really is an ideal situation for a small biotech company to be participating in a study like this.
Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, my favorite part of this setup is it truly does benefit the patients. Even before any of these products may or may not be commercialized, you have, like you said, 80% opportunity to receive an investigational product as opposed to a control group, whereas in a regular study, maybe 50-50 for the most part.
Yeah, exactly.
Monica, Chris, any final questions for Greg regarding Kintara or anything else?
From my end.
As social investors, we've got to inform the community of all things possible. Did I miss anything?
I'm sure you did, but it's not coming to mind.
I'm sure I did too. But this is why we do part 2s. This is why we do part 2.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to add that what I love about Kintara and all the projects are obviously the studies that Kintara is carrying out are for disease that otherwise they wouldn't have any treatments or treatments that work as good as the ones that you guys are studying right now. So that's a great work, great job, great opportunities, and obviously great treatments for people out there.
Mm-hmm. And I know, Greg, I don't know, we're early in the study, right? Like, you guys, Kintara just joined in January. It's now May. So it's fairly early in the study. We can't necessarily ask for like patient stories or anything like that. But do you guys think you have something like that planned for the future? Maybe featuring like a patient journey in the study, or is that something you have to talk to CGAR about?
GCAR certainly will.
GCAR.
GCAR certainly plays a role in how these things are discussed, but we do work with them to really publicize the study, because it's a great, it's not just about enrolling people in this study, but I also hope we're helping to popularize the idea of a platform study. GCAR is doing something similar in the COVID space. They have plans to do it in some neurodegenerative diseases, I believe.
Yeah.
I mean, this is something that can be replicated and in my opinion, should be replicated. So we'll do everything we can to help publicize that. And of course, we want Kintara's participation in this to be well understood and appropriately received too, because I think it puts us in an enviable position.
Well, that's our job then as social investors to keep an eye on this. One last benefit, I almost forgot. See, I did forget something. The FDA, Kintara had talks with the FDA. The FDA prefers this kind of a model, right? Like the Agile study?
The design of this study was vetted in some detail with the FDA, and there was a level of stated support for the design and how it goes forward. And you can see on the GCAR website or the Kintara slide deck, for example, a quote from Janet Woodcock about platform trials, and that this is the future of clinical trials.
Wow.
So I think that's a pretty strong endorsement from the regulatory companies. Yeah.
That's a big statement. For those watching till the end, there you go. You got a golden nugget. You investors that are doing your due diligence, you stayed till the end. Good for you guys. Not financial advice. I'm not even sure if we own any Kintara, honestly. Chris and I have a few companies
I don't think we do.
Monica does. Okay. But doesn't mean we won't. Okay. So just do your own due diligence, guys. Invest for the long haul. We try to cover the companies that are worth looking at long term. We're not traders. We don't look for catalysts and things like that. We're long term. So thank you, Greg, for coming on. I really appreciate it. And Monica and Chris for joining. And we definitely have to do a part 2 at some point, as well as we get more, I guess, as the study matures and evolves, we can get an update from you on enrollment or all kinds of other things.
Great.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening, and catch you all later. Bye-bye.